Today we bring you a live stream debate on the topic of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. This presentation is a joint project of the Richland Debate Club, Turning Point USA, and Richland Student Media. DACA is not a pathway to citizenship. It postpones deportation for qualified people who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children. Under the program, DACA recipients can be approved to work in the United States and can renew their status for 2 years. DACA was created as an executive order by President Barack Obama. In September 2017, Trump administration announced that it was ending DACA. The president gave Congress until March 5th to come up with a bipartisan plan. Now that the deadline has passed, the administration will be forced to continue issuing individual renewals by court order. I will now turn things over to Government Professor Patrick Moore, who will serve as the debate moderator.
Thank you, Miranda. Joining us in the studio today are Andrew Castillo with Turning Point USA. He will open the debate and speak in favor of reforming DACA. Brian Miranda with the Richland Debate Club will argue in favor of continuing DACA. This will be a modified Lincoln-Douglas debate, which will include questions from me as the moderator. We took a poll of our studio audience before the debate to determine their positions on DACA. We will conduct another poll after the debate to see if their positions have changed and determine a winner. Let's get started. Now, I will remind the speakers that we will be strictly enforcing the timing rules. You can see the timer, and I can. If you start to go over on your time, I will be cutting you off pretty brutally, so keep that in mind. Andrew Castillo with Turning Point USA, you are up first with your opening statement of 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Well, thank you, Professor Moore, and thank you, Mr. Miranda, for coming up here. Well, my name is Andrew Castillo. It's a pleasure being back up here today. You know, with the deadline passed March 5th, you know, it's up to Congress to get something done. You know, we're doing this administration. They have a lot of work to do, but at this point, DACA just seems to be a critical issue here in this country. And at this point, I feel like, you know, I'm not a critical opposer of DACA. I do have friends that have DACA status, and I'm not obviously a you know, big, like I said, an opposer of the deferred action, or DACA, if you will, deferred action of childhood arrivals. I just think that, you know, we have to get something done with this issue. It's about time that this, you know, the conversation is brought up at this point, and we need to do something swiftly at this point. There's a lot of people a lot of children held in limbo, and we need to take care of this issue. Congress has to take care of this issue. Both the Democrats and the Republicans both are being held for blame at this point, and we need swift action. You know, 8 years was long enough. Now let's get something done at this point for the DACA recipients. You know, according to the Hill, we have the American public backs the immigration deal with DACA and border security, and it's all about border security that comes with DACA. You know, the state of Texas leads its way, Texas and California, and not just those two states, but we have these people, these children that are held in limbo with this. But I think at this point I want to yield my time and to the moderator, or Mr. Miranda.
Brian Miranda with the Richland College Debate Club. Why don't you proceed with your opening statement? You have us up to 5 minutes.
All right. So, before I start my speech, might I just ask one quick question to Andrew Castillo to clarify something?
Please.
When you say amp up border security, are you talking about building a wall, or what do you have in mind exactly?
Well, of course, I believe that with this wall, you know, it does amp up border security. But I want to counter with a question to you. Was a fence prompted 10 years ago? So does that to you require border security?
I will answer your question in my speech.
Okay.
All right.
Fine.
So to get started. All right, so my opponent has declared that we should indeed build a wall while still keep DACA. Okay, so this completely narrows down the debate. Now we are just simply arguing whether building a wall would be a good idea. Now, I believe that it is a terrible idea for two simple reasons. One reason, it's completely redundant. There's no point to build a wall. Now, my opponent Castillo has mentioned that why did only 10 years ago that we barely built a fence and have some security? Well, to be honest, I don't really have an answer for that. But instead of dwelling on the past, we need to focus on solutions right now. As my opponent has mentioned, we need to get something done right now. So, as far as security is concerned, I have a document from the Department of Homeland Security from 2016, like a year and a half-ish ago. Okay, and they basically studied a bunch of data from people who tried to cross the border illegally, from people who successfully crossed the border illegally, and from people they have apprehended. Now, and this is regarding the U.S.-Mexico border, just so we're clear. Now, as of 2005, approximately 1.9 million illegal immigrants were able to get through the border successfully. That's in 2005. Now, something a little more recent, which is 2015, now only 200,000 immigrants have successfully illegally crossed through the border. There has been a significant drop in people trying to cross. Now, why is that, you might ask? Well, part of it has to do with what Andrew mentioned. Only 10 years ago, we actually started putting up more border security. We have 9/11 to thank for that. We have George Bush to thank for that. But there are other aspects at play as well. According to NPR, from an article released in 2011. Now, I will admit the article is a bit dated, but I believe the information in there is still highly relevant. The cartel is making it far too dangerous to even cross the border through traditional ways. According to this document, things are so bad in Matamoros, a border city just across Rio Grande from Brownsville, Texas, that last month the city police were stripped of their weapons, ordered off the streets, and replaced by soldiers. Gang members openly sell pirated gasoline that they've stolen from government pipelines, and lookouts for the drug cartels monitor the south bank of the Rio Grande to make sure no one tries to swim across who hasn't paid for that privilege. So they are actually extorting people who just simply want to cross the border. They are actually saying, hey, give us money or we will hurt you. And even giving them money doesn't guarantee your safety. As a matter of fact, a man by the name of Perez has tried to cross the border, and he says it has been incredibly difficult for him. Many migrants are afraid of getting kidnapped, and many of them have actually been kidnapped, robbed, and being there. Some of the women and children have been raped or sold to sex trafficking, and they wanted to. And Perez says this: "I wanted to go to the U.S. to look for work. Now they just want to go home." The real issue isn't illegal immigrants crossing the border. The real issue is the cartels who are making it far too dangerous, not just for people who are trying to cross the border, but for the citizens of Mexico as well. Now, you might be thinking, but Brian, could the wall possibly fix that? It's just simply that. It's a wall, nothing more, nothing less. And as a matter of fact, the cartel doesn't operate just within the wall. According to a source from Kevin Perkins, the Assistant Director for Criminal Investigations Division of the FBI, as of 2010, they also use tunnels, they use aircraft, they have regular civilians disguised. They basically have cartel members disguised as just regular civilians trying to cross the border. Maritime vessels, railways, tunnels, vehicles, you name it. So, building a wall is redundant, and it's also going to cost us a whole lot of money. And that's where I'm going to end today, by just simply reading one simple document from the New York Times as of 2017. The border would cost approximately $70 billion alone, and just $150 a year to maintain. And it doesn't take a genius to realize how much land there is between the Texas border and the California border. It would take years just to build that. So now I pass it off to the moderator.
Okay. You both got off of the main topic of today's debate in your opening remarks, and I'd like to try to redirect back to DACA specifically. That's something that needs to be resolved. We can talk about the wall, but the current issue in America is the DACA debate. What should we do about DACA specifically? Separately from the wall, as was mentioned, the deadline for DACA renewals was March 5th. The Trump administration has been forced by a court injunction to continue issuing renewals beyond this deadline until the legal resolution is achieved. But what form should that legal resolution take? Could we get back to DACA? And first of all, Andrew, what should we do specifically about DACA? We should do something quickly, but what should that be?
Well, sure. I just want the conversation to be brought up again. I feel like, with the Trump administration actually getting that court injunction by a court in Maryland, I just feel like we need to, with Congress, what we should do is that DACA should be, they give them a pathway to citizenship, and mainly because I just feel like the vital center on this issue has been ignored because of votes, because of what's happening in Congress, the Democratic and Republican caucuses. And also, they quickly reveal one of the few remaining ideological fissures within the parties. The Trump administration had already put out a resolution to fix the issue. It's just that one side of Congress doesn't want to get it done. They've already, I'm not going to get into the number, I don't want to butcher the numbers, but they've already laid out the plan to fix DACA with this administration. The Homeland Security Secretary Kristen Nelson said she supported a permanent solution to the problem. And that means giving people an opportunity to work, pay taxes, and prosper here as full citizens. And that's what I want. We need to reform DACA, but we just can't let it just slide under the rug and then, the issue just becomes a cold case again. We ought to just fix the issue now and bring the conversation. And so that's why I give credit to the administration. Going back to the border wall, the walls do work. The walls do work in Europe. And so it's all about border security first. But I want to touch on DACA because I feel like I want the conversation to be brought up again. And I feel like during this administration and during this legislature in Congress, it's being brought up, but they're just taking their sweet time. And I feel like, when asked how many legal immigrants, should be allowed into America each year, most people, 53%, said that 500,000 was a fair number, which of course is far below the existing annual legal immigration of 1 million. So again, this is indicative of America's general conservatism when it comes to immigration, which President Trump tapped into and also win the Electoral College. Okay,
thank you. Brian, how would you respond to Andrew's suggestion that DACA recipients be given a path to citizenship?
I completely agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Now, I understand this may pose as a possible stalemate. Well, we both agree with one solution, then how can we possibly keep debating? Well, the thing is, if both of us just kind of stick to our guns the entire time, we will get nowhere. So now that it seems that we're both in agreement that it should be put a pathway to citizenship, the real question I want to pose is, how is the wall correlated to DACA? Or you feel like, no, actually, yeah, that is the question I want to ask. How is DACA correlated or connected to the wall exactly?
Border security. Like I said, the administration has already laid out a plan to actually fix the issue. And like I said, I'm not saying every DACA recipient they're committing crime, which they weren't forced. They weren't forced in this country where they kind of were. But I just feel like I want to give them a path to citizenship. I'm not here to be anti-DACA. I'm just saying we need to fix the issue. And I just feel like with border fences, it's not going to take care of the issue. If we take care of actually building something physical, I feel like we can actually tap into that. But that's where I stand on that.
I'm not understanding exactly how this connection is being made. DACA recipients are already here. A wall is going to have no bearing on DACA recipients. They're here already. And so I am a little bit eager to hear what the specifics of the solution to the DACA problem should be. And the question revolves not just around what you think, but how should politicians deal with this? It's probably true that given the fact that there is a general election coming up in November, politicians being interested in being reelected are going to avoid hot topics, avoid controversial votes between now and then. How can we encourage politicians to do the things that both of you appear to be supporting?
It seems that Meg has been saying that we've been out of time for quite a while now. So would you like us to answer that question in our speeches?
That'd be fine.
All right.
Okay. Now is the time that's set aside for rebuttal. And so I'd like for you all to try to think of your opponent's statements and think of something to rebut. You seem to be in agreement on most topics already. So think of your opponent's statements and how would you respond to what they've argued?
Well, sure.
First of all, Andrew.
Sure. No, I just feel like my rebuttal to this is that one issue I do think that I'm not sure if Brian can get an understanding of, but I was thinking, well, I mean, my question would be, does law and order matter to this country? Does law and order matter to you? My thing is that a lot of people think that we're just using these recipients as political pawns, and that's why I feel like the other political aisle is doing. Look, I just look at it this way. The anti-amnesty and, the conservative crowd, if you will also have to accept a compromise here, especially in the more conservative House. Listen, I do think that both, the Republicans, they're not getting the job done, but also the Democrats, they're still, according to Senator Steny Hoyer, just recently he said the other day that he wants to actually stall on the DACA bill at this point and focus on other issues. At this point, there's no time to stall. We got to get it done. And so they think that, this is going to be the resistance to this agenda. I feel like, this, we need, like I said, I am in agreement with a path to citizenship, but let's also fix the loopholes within the DACA for these DACA recipients.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
It seems everything is clear now. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my evidence.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So it seems my opponent has brought up an interesting point. DACA loopholes. Well, I try not to use personal anecdotes in debates, but I feel like with this particular point, it might be necessary. I myself am a dreamer. I got DACA status approximately almost 2 years ago. I'm supposed to be renewing this winter. And as for the whole loophole system, well, you see, thing is, getting DACA is a lot more complicated than some people seem to believe. To give you a perspective, I actually have the requirements from DACA that's been provided by the United States Customs and Immigration Services, and it's been completely updated as of, well, a week ago. So you had to be under the age of 31 as of June 15, 2012. I actually know a friend of mine who got to the U.S. literally 1 week after that deadline, and she hasn't been able to get DACA at all. So basically, she has to find some way to get a green card or just practically think of something else. You were physically present in the U.S. on June 15, 2012, and at the time of making your request for consideration for deferred action. So not only did you have to be under the age of 31, you must have been physically in the U.S. by that date. And here is how completely specific they get with these things. if you were in the U.S. before June 15, but you decided to go to Mexico or you decided to go somewhere else to visit family or something, and you somehow made it back, since you weren't literally there on the 15th, you can't get DACA whatsoever. And the reason why it's so specific is because we have the Department of Homeland Security to thank for that. Them and the fact that the USCIS and immigration law is so completely underfunded, so completely understaffed, is the reason why these things take so long. And more importantly, you must not have been a convicted felon, had a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more other misdemeanors, and do not pose a threat to national security. When I myself was getting DACA, it actually took them like 2 months just to simply look at my background. They had to, they had to get my fingerprints. They had to, take pictures. They asked for documents of where I've lived or where I went to school and all that stuff. My lawyer literally said, get report cards from literally every semester that you have been here, just to prove that you've been here in the U.S. So there are already so many restrictions just to make sure that you were indeed follow all of these possible guidelines. And as for the whole DACA loophole thing, well, he says there's a DACA loophole, but I'm pretty sure we can gladly explain this during cross-examination, but what loophole are you talking about specifically? Are you talking about fake DACA? Well, the thing is, I've done my research, and basically, it was one giant game of telephone. They weren't talking about fake DACA status. They were talking about fake Social Security cards, which is a completely different issue in and of its own. On top of that. And here's one more extreme guideline that they ask of any DACA recipients. You need to have been in school, have graduated high school, or a GED. You need at least a high school education. And once again, from the document itself, I was in school but dropped out and did not graduate. I am not currently in school, and I'm not honorably discharged veteran of the Coast Guard, the Armed Forces of the U.S. And you cannot get DACA if you don't have a high school diploma. So there's another restriction that's completely going against people who want to be DACA recipients. So thing is, if this issue is border security, I already talked about it in my first speech. The wall is completely redundant, and there are already far less people trying to cross the border. And if his issue is that it's loopholes or there's not enough restrictions, I think I have made it perfectly clear that it is difficult and a time-consuming process and an expensive process on top of that, just so you can get permission to work for 2 years. Just for a Social Security card and just for the ability to not get deported. I can't get financial aid. I can't, get some of these Social Security services like Medicaid and all that stuff. When I'm sick, I have to pay out of my own pocket. I had to pay for school out of my own pocket. I have had friends who are also DACA recipients who had to pay for school out of their own pocket or rely entirely on private scholarships just to go to a 4-year school. I'm sorry for getting a little too personal. That was not my intention, but I just needed the audience here at the studio and here watching at home to understand that this is a complicated situation. Thank you.
Okay, you mentioned, Andrew, DACA loophole. Could you describe what you exactly meant by that? Brian made reference to it, but I'm not clear what the DACA loopholes are that you're talking about.
Well, so the loopholes, and specifically I'm saying about actually having, the DACA recipients who are here, the loopholes as far as actually, just had on the top of my head. What I'm trying to say is that the issue, it falls under Congress. If they're going to fix, as far as giving these recipients a pathway to citizenship, as far as giving them, and I assume, Brian knows it as well, but, if the prior administration had done, if they did the DACA deal, which was, in fact, it was at that time unconstitutional. They didn't actually bring a conversation up in Congress, and so both Democrats and Republicans, they didn't get it done. The loopholes I'm talking about, as far as when you actually, when they come into the country, actually give them, or I say it again, pathway to citizenship, but lost my thing again. As far as the primary goal is to negotiate hard on this issue as far as on immigration and what's happening with these DACA recipients.
Okay. One of the things that Andrew mentioned, Brian, was, or one of the statements he made or questions he asked was, does anybody in the U.S. care about law and order? Do we care about law and order anymore? How does the law and order issue play into the DACA debate?
Oh, certainly. People definitely do care about law and order. DACA recipients definitely care about law and order. And law-abiding citizens definitely do care about law and order. Now, how does this connect to the issue of DACA? Well, it depends on how you actually do define law and order. So from the definition I'm going to be using for law and order, it's just simply this: just cause, due process, all of that stuff. How order plays into DACA is, all these guidelines and restrictions that when it comes to DACA itself. Clearly, even though I have mentioned that this is a very excruciating process, it's all for the sake of law and order. It's all for the sake of fairness. The reason why it takes so much time to do a background check, because we want to make sure people who are here in the U.S., who have came here illegally as children, want nothing more than to get themselves an education, start a family, the American dream. That's all we just simply want. And now you may have heard that whenever you hear about DACA, you hear several different numbers thrown out. 800,000, 1 million, 2 million, blah, blah, blah. Well, according to the United States Customs and Immigration Services, there are approximately estimate about 700,000, 650,000-ish recipients. The reason why you hear numbers higher than that, because those were people who applied for DACA but weren't able to get through. And some of those who weren't able to get through were indeed felons, or people who have had too many misdemeanors or major misdemeanors. So there is definitely law and order involved when it comes into getting DACA. Now, Andrew has mentioned, when we passed DACA years ago, it was considered unconstitutional by many critics. Now,
Okay. Can we hold the rest of your statement for your closing remarks, because now it's time for us to move to Andrew's summary statement of your position in this issue.
Sure. So, like I said in the beginning of the speech, like I said, we need to reform this issue on DACA. As far as like I said, I have I get back on a personal issue. I do have friends that are DACA recipients, like Brian, who I consider as a friend as well. My thing is this: if the issue, we need to actually take care of the issue as far as having a merit-based immigration system, having Congress actually taking care of the issue swiftly. Like I said, this administration, the Homeland Security, they're all for pathway to citizenship. I just feel like people, they want to portray this administration that we're anti-DACA, we're anti-immigration, we're in a way anti-immigrant. That's just not the case at this point. If we have an administration that's trying to work diligently and actually fix the issue at this point. There's been a lot of, for really in 2 decades of, at this point, ineffective and hypocritical policies. We need to get down to the issue. Overall, I think, according to the Hill as well, 68%, including majorities of all parties, opposed a lottery for 50,000 immigrants a year, which in a way, it's a remarkable policy. The Constitution introduced checks and balances so that no faction could get in its way. And this is just the kind of issue that the Founding Fathers envisioned, and they settled through compromise. The question is whether, Paul Ryan, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Chuck Schumer can tame the far right and far left elements of the caucuses. I just feel like the state of Maryland, the court of Maryland, they've allowed the DACA thing to go through, or the policy to keep it going, or the court of Maryland. But at this point, the Supreme Court, they won't hear at this point. But like I said, and I'll repeat it again, this administration, and at this point, they're trying to find solutions, not stall on them. And make no mistake, if there's a good deal, those on the extremes, will be unhappy. But I feel like this is all about America. America will be the winner in this case. And like I said, I'm not anti-DACA or anything.
Thank you, Andrew. Brian, Could you summarize your position for us?
All right, sure. So let's take it from the very beginning of the case. My opponent has brought up, well, one of the issues is people are stalling too much. I agree with that. We need to put our petty differences aside and discuss a solution. Then he brought up border security. Well, as I have mentioned, border security has significantly decreased according to my document from the Department of Homeland Security. Building a wall would be too expensive. To be exact, $70 billion to build, $150 million a year to maintain, and it would take, they don't have an exact estimate, but it doesn't take a geography major to realize that Texas, California, quite a ways, would take years to build. And would take years to build. As a matter of fact, John F. Kelly, the Homeland Security Secretary, told the members of Congress this month that it would be doubtful that a wall along the full border of Mexico would ever be built. So it might not even happen. And as I have also mentioned from a statement made by an FBI member at 2010, that there are bigger issues that we have to worry about, mainly the cartel. So rather than trying to build a wall or do anything like that, we should put our resources to the DEA on trying to crack down on these drug cartels. We should put more resources on trying to crack down on these gun smuggling rings, these sex trafficking rings, all of these crime rings. We need to put more resources on that and not just making a wall 5 feet higher. That's where we need to put our resources. Then he brought up a DACA loophole. As I have mentioned, both from personal experience and from the horse's mouth, the United States Central and Customs and Immigration Services, of all these restrictions and how completely serious they are about these restrictions. And all my opponent had just simply had to say about that, oh no, the DACA loophole exists. It still exists. Well, how does it exist exactly? If you're talking about people wrongfully getting DACA, well, again, you can't really do much. It's not fake DACA that you should be worried about. It's these fake Social Security numbers that you should be worried about. That's a completely different issue on its own. And then finally, and that's to simply summarize the debate. Now to summarize my position, how do I exactly win today's debate? Well, for one, I have already brought up that security and the wall is redundant. That's just it. I know I sound like a broken record right now, but that's just the truth. It's redundant. And for the DACA loophole, well, throughout the entire debate, and I will be 100% honest with you, I still don't fully understand. What do you mean by a DACA loophole?
Okay. Right now we need to shift to the next section of our debate, which is an opportunity for each of you to question your opponent. So since that's what you were about to do, why don't you go ahead and proceed?
All right,
we have a few minutes for grand crossfire between the two of you.
All right, please elaborate on the DACA loophole.
Like I'm trying to say, the DACA loophole is actually fixing the issue as far as we need to have merit-based immigration, giving these children, these kids, a pathway to citizenship.
Oh, I 100% agree with you with that. We definitely do need a pathway to citizenship. But let me stop you for just a moment, though.
But can I counter go on your other issue as far as the border wall? I have an idea. Why don't we just use or not convicted yet, but why don't we just use El Chapo's assets and actually use his assets? This guy's really a billionaire, since you mentioned drug cartels. Use his assets, since he's in prison, and actually fund the wall. How about that? Fund the border wall from that.
Okay, we use money that has been made illegally from the bloods of innocent people and from smuggling drugs that have actually ruined several lives of people both in Mexico and the U.S. to build a wall that's only 5 feet higher.
Well,
I'm sorry that came off as snarky, but how do you respond to that?
Well, sure. Bloods. Okay, look, this man really is in court right now for thousands of crimes within Mexico and some in America. Like I'm just trying to say, we could fund the border wall with his assets, his money. This guy's already committed atrocities, but if it works in Europe and if it works really in Israel, and it's not coming out of being prejudice, whatnot. Let's actually fund the wall by using his asset, his money.
All right, you mentioned Europe, and say that the wall works or security works. Well, explain the acid attacks that happen in Europe quite regularly. Ooh, the wall is definitely working there.
I'm not
No
aware
comment?
About what acid attack.
Oh, well, allow me to inform you and the audience. So basically, throughout So throughout Europe, right, several European countries, there are people who randomly attack passbyers with acid. They use acid because they have strict gun laws there, so they use acid instead of, well, guns. And some of these people who commit these acid attacks are indeed people who have crossed the border, whether legally or illegally. So if you want to compare Europe to U.S. and feel like if it works in Europe, it works in the U.S. Well, in the Europe, it's a very flawed system. So trying to apply that logic to the U.S., don't you think that seems a little flawed?
No, not at all. I mean,
Not at all? Okay.
if it works, then why not, build one here? I mean, look, what I'm trying to say is that it's all about border security, and it's something that we need to take care of this issue now. Like I said, there's already an electronic wall that's called E-Verify, but why not build a physical wall and actually taking care of the issue? Right, you mentioned cartels. Okay, if, I hear that they're all over Texas committing atrocities here. And so if they're here, why not take care of the issue with actually building something that can actually alleviate the issue? So, going back to the issue of border security, it really, like I said in the opening remarks and on my other statements.
Andrew, speaking of opening remarks, we've now reached the point in the debate where each of you need to make your closing remarks. So why don't you just continue and segue into your closing statement for today's debate?
Well, sure. Like I want to piggyback off of what I said. I feel like at the end, America will be the winner. It's all about Americans first. And I do think that the DACA recipients, they're hardworking people, but in reality, the immigrants are hardworking people. I just feel like the thing I'm trying to come out at or propose today is actually fixing an issue that hasn't been fixed. That's going on for right now, going on 8.5 years. Like I said, the American public, they back the immigration deal with DACA and border security. We need to have border security first. And my opponent, Mr. Miranda, he's brought up some fair points. We can agree on certain issues. It's just that we just think that, or on my behalf, I just feel like we need to get things done at this point. Like I said, voters, they will support limits on this program, but there is a lot of negotiating left on this one to get it right. And like I said, America will be the real winners at this point. The administration the current administration is in favor of fixing the DACA issues. So what I want to leave off here today is that I feel like this deal can get done, regardless of the court orders, and I just don't want these recipients to be considered as political pawns. I'm not sure if we have any DACA recipients in the audience, but I don't want to use y'all as a political pawn. And really, I feel like this issue can get taken care of. DACA will be, in my opinion, can be settled. It's just up to Congress. It's not up to the president. It's up to Congress to do something. And as time and time again, as critical I am of Congress, I still do have faith in them at this point. And it's been a pleasure at this speaking about the current deferred action for childhood arrivals and their plight. And thank you.
Thank you. And Brian, time for your closing statement.
All right, so I would like to address some points that my opponent has made, which I want to congratulate him. He's presented his arguments, he's presented his case, and I feel like he's made so much improvement since the last debate. So, congratulations. And okay, so let's start off with let's fund the wall using El Chapo's money. Okay, so take his crimes and his terrible atrocities aside. Let's put that aside for just 1 minute. As I have mentioned before, it would take approximately $120 million per year just to simply maintain the wall, and it would take so much time to even build a wall in the first place. He mentioned himself, he's a millionaire, not a billionaire, which cost $70 billion just to build a wall itself. So just simply keep that in mind. And he also makes most of his money here in Mexico, not in the U.S. And to give you an idea of how poor the Mexican economy is, for just $1 you have 20 pesos. $1. So do you know how many tacos you can buy with that? Just letting you know. So snarky remarks aside, let's move on to another point that he has mentioned. He said it's all about border security, and it's all about Congress putting their petty differences aside and trying to come up with a solution. Second part, I agree with. Border security, well, how about instead of taking El Chapo's money and putting that into border security, we could take El Chapo's money and use that for more productive resources. We could use that money to help fund the DEA. We could use that money to help fund the Texas Rangers and the Texas National Guard, and possibly California National Guard as well, since both states are not only big states but also are pretty close to the border as well. We can use that money to fund that instead of using money to fund a wall that will only be 5 feet higher. I'm sorry for sounding like a broken record. I really am. But that's just the reality of the situation. Now, while we're both in agreement, yes, DACA is good. What we disagree on is how do we go about dealing with this situation? How do we go about dealing with border security and all that stuff? And all we just simply do is keep the status quo and let nature, let the government run its course. Because, and there is right one thing, America will be the winner, but not for his reasons.
Thank you, Brian. And that concludes the back and forth on the debate today. Thank you so much, Andrew Castillo from the Richland College chapter of Turning Point USA. Thank you so much, Brian Miranda from the Richland College Debate Club. I appreciate it, and I will turn it back to Miranda.
Thank you, Professor Moore, for being here today. We really appreciate it. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to have y'all shake hands. And this officially concludes our debate today. The winner will be tallied and posted on richlandstudentmedia.com later today. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a production of Richland Student Media, the Richland Debate Club, and the Richland chapter of Turning Point USA. Thank you again.